My grandmother had Alzheimer's disease. Eventually, my grandfather needed more help too. And they actually ran out of money at a point because they'd been getting care at home, which was their express wish. And then in the middle of that, my mom had a stroke. Now you flash forward, and I had moved to Washington, D.C. to work for AARP. And my dad, over the years, started showing signs of Alzheimer's disease. And I think one of the reasons that I think I've come through without bitterness is I have always tried to focus on gratefulness. I did the best I could, and I know that.
Life Reimagined with Stacey Ray.
Before we begin, make sure you like, subscribe, and follow on social media. Hi, I am very excited to have a very special guest today. I am chatting with Amy Goyer, AARP's National Family and Caregiving Expert, and she also moderates the AARP Family Caregivers Discussion Group on Facebook. Now, the important thing to know is she's been a family caregiver her entire adult life, starting with her grandparents, her parents, sisters, and other relatives and friends. She's the author of Juggling Life, Work, and Caregiving, as well as Color Your Way Content when caring for a loved one. So, welcome, Amy.
Hi, how are you?
I am so happy to have you here. This is a topic that is so near and dear to my heart. I spent 30 years in healthcare, 10 of
Okay.
those as a case manager,
Right.
and working with so many patients and their families trying to figure out the caregiving situation. So you are AARP's expert in families and caregiving, is that right?
Correct.
You have spent your life caring for others, family members, and friends. Do you think people are normally just caregivers? Some people, some are not.
I think it's really it's kind of a mixture of things because the circumstances make us caregivers. And most of the caregivers who are knee deep in caregiving are not really that prepared. They haven't had training as caregivers. We just fall into it. And, I always tell caregivers one thing to remember is that we have a choice in everything we do. And it helps for us to realize that we choose to care because then we're not in a victim space. Even though you'll ask people, did you have any choice? And they'll say, I didn't have any choice because no one else would do it. What I say is, I've worked in this field for about 40 years, and there are many, many people out there who don't have anyone looking out for them, even in the smallest way. And that's not always because they don't have family. So I think, there are people who naturally kind of fall into that role, especially in big families. You'll see, oh, you're the one, lots
Right,
of caregivers
right.
say that because they have it does come more naturally. But I know many, many caregivers who it doesn't come naturally. They don't feel like they love doing it, but they're doing it, and they're doing it either with open hearts and because they love their family member, or because there really isn't anyone else to do it. There are many caregivers who take care of people who were not that good to them growing up, for example, their parents. And so, that can be a challenge in and of itself, but many are doing it.
Now, tell me about your caregiving journey on a personal level because you started with your grandparents. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes. So when I was in my 20s, I was in college. My grandmother had Alzheimer's disease, and my grandfather was 10 years older than she. And in their 80s, my dad was a college professor, and he went from Ohio University to Arizona State University. So across the country, far away from his parents, and he was the only child. So, as my junior and senior year in college, I would, on my breaks, drive over to Indiana, stay with my one grandmother, drive up to South Bend, check on those grandparents. And over the years, they started needing more and more help as her Alzheimer's progressed. And so I started working in the field of aging. And when I graduated from college, I had a degree in music therapy. So I was working in adult daycare centers and nursing homes. Later, I worked for the Ohio Department of Aging. Eventually, my grandfather needed more help too. And they actually ran out of money at a point because they'd been getting care at home, which was their express wish, and ended up going into nursing facility under Medicaid because they didn't have Medicaid waivers at that time in Indiana. And so my grandmother died in 4 weeks, and my grandfather died 6 weeks later. And then in the middle of that, my mom had a stroke. So it put dad in the position of kind of primary caregiver for his parents and for mom because he was the
Right.
power of attorney and all of that. So, that
Right.
was part of the reason I tried to help as much as I could. But, I had just started a new job, and I talk about this because we know more than 60% of family caregivers are working, and I didn't have any leave. Oh, and my mom had the stroke, but I wanted to go out to Arizona and help out, so I ended up being able to borrow leave. They had a system that people could donate leave to a
Oh,
fund kind
yeah.
of that
Yeah.
who had people who never use their leave. And so I was able to go out and help get my mom into a good rehab because I again had been working in the field. I knew what to look for. So then, over the years, there's dad trying to help with mom. She had aphasia, and so she had a major communication disorder in terms of
Right.
knowing what she knew what she wanted to say.
You
It
wanna
didn't
say
affect her
right.
memory, but she
Right.
couldn't communicate it, and she had some
Communicate.
receptive
Yeah.
too. So that's part one kind of my caregiving. And just right there, I like to illustrate the fact that there are so many roles caregivers play.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I was not the power of attorney for my grandparents, but I got services going. I was a respite person. In some ways, I was a respite person for my dad with my mom's care, but I was also
Right.
researching options for her and trying to find new things that would be helpful, all of that. Now you flash forward, and I had moved to Washington, D.C. to work for AARP, and my dad, over the years, started showing signs of Alzheimer's disease. And so, we'd always dreaded that with when you have it in the family,
Yeah.
we always worried.
Right.
And he, very early signs, and he had a very good doctor, by the way. And all of you listening, remember to make sure that your doctors are doing some type of screening testing on a regular basis for
Yeah.
cognitive abilities. So he got him on medication early. He was still driving, still in charge of his and mom's life. But of course, as she got older, she had a lot of health issues and more complicated to take care of. So there came a point where we wanted him to stop driving. So I ended up quitting my job, becoming a consultant so I had more flexibility, and moving out to Arizona so that I could be near for my parents. But when we wanted daddy to stop driving, and that is a deal breaker for many people, it was one of the few times I saw my dad angry when we asked him to stop driving. But the next day, he said, "Okay, if I can't drive, then we're moving. We're not going to be stuck in this house." He was still pretty with it. And so I said, "Okay, let's look for a place." And they moved into a place a couple miles from their home that was a senior community, had independent living, assisted living, and a skilled nursing on site. And I was pleased with that because I knew they might need additional care at different times,
Sure.
right? They did pretty well in the senior community, but over the years, my mom had chronic UTIs, and urinary tract infections can cause a lot of various other problems. And she had a
Mhm.
terrible fall and
Yeah.
fractured her spine in a couple places. And she had to have surgery. The problem was that then she got C. diff in the hospital, which is a terrible infection, and went into atrial fibrillation. I finally got her to rehab, and she had a heart attack and congestive heart failure, pneumonia, sepsis. So all of this went on and on and on. And so it was like 40 days and nights with her in the hospital, and she pulled through.
That in itself is amazing. Most people are not, especially when they're already debilitated, as you know, to be able to come out of that.
Yeah, she was amazing. She just was very much determined. So, I had that going on, and then my dad ended up in the hospital for a prostate inflammation issue and urinary tract infection, but he aspirated and got pneumonia. And he had I don't know if you've ever heard of this. He had a flap in his esophagus,
Yes.
and the food got caught there, et cetera. So
Yeah.
we knew he had that, but it had been kind of fine, manageable.
Right.
Well, at this point, it was like he's got to have surgery, or he's going to constantly be doing this.
Yeah, and kinda
Oh,
choked to death. Yeah.
and you in your work probably helped families make decisions on things like this. The doctors urged us to do a feeding tube until he could have surgery, and I decided to do it. And looking back, I wish I hadn't, because it was a major problem for dad. He couldn't eat normal food. He lost a ton of weight. And we were in the hospital 4 times with it clogged, or he had to replace it one time. It was so hard on him and the family, and all of us. And I had started paying for some paid caregivers because I was working full time the whole time. Thank God for flexible works, because I could get my deliverables done, but I maybe be doing them in the middle of the night. And so and we brought him back to their apartment, and then a few days later, we had a major tragedy in our family. My niece, who was only 19, we lost her to suicide. And she was the light in
Our
their
condolences.
lives. She had lived there in Arizona where they lived, and she worked at the facility where they were living. It was a devastating experience.
How do you come back from that?
That's exactly the question. And so it's when you want to get in bed and just stay there for a long time, because it just brings you to your knees. And yet I had mom and dad. I had to take care of them. And they were you know, mom was devastated. Dad, when I told them, and I had to tell them, what I understood initially, my niece's name was Shaylee. He kept saying, Shaylee, our Shaylee? And I was like, yes. And then by the next day, it was just gone. He didn't understand what was
You know,
happening at all.
right,
Because remember, here he is with the feeding tube and not eating, getting right
right,
nutrition and all of that. So
right.
it was just awful. But he got the surgery 2 months later, and he recovered fully from that. So we were again, my parents amazingly resilient, right?
Very tough.
Yes, very proud. At that point, they both needed 24/7 care. I was
Yeah,
terrified mom would fall again.
mhm,
Dad's Alzheimer's had been progressing more fast from all the trauma and
right.
the loss, and then, everything, stress. And so they couldn't afford to stay where they were. So I ended up moving them back in the house with me. And dad lived with me for 6 years. Mom passed away a year after they moved in with me. So that was another really horrible loss. She was kind of the motivation, and she noticed everything, and she appreciated everything, and she was daddy's North Star. So without her, he floundered more. And so we cared for dad right till the end of his life. He was 94 when he passed in his sleep. And he had, we went through a lot of stages over those next 5 years. And, Alzheimer's care can be extremely intense. And it was financially devastating for me doing all of this. And I ended up in bankruptcy. And that is something that's very hard to talk about. It is a devastating experience. And it was after
Yeah,
the last year of my dad's life was when it was really adding up so much. And then that's a whole nother conversation of how that ended up happening. But I just kept building up debt to take care of things and take care of everyone in the family, and not thinking, okay, I'll work my way out of this. I have years ahead of
Right.
me. And I was, by the way, 48 when I moved to Arizona to take care of my parents. So here I am now, facing retirement, and I'm going to have to work much longer than I would have liked to because I lost everything. I was also the primary caregiver for my oldest sister, and she had Cushing disease, so she had a lot of side effects, and affects many aspects of your health. And she had two surgeries to try and remove the tumor on her pituitary gland that was causing it. Unfortunately, they weren't successful. And she passed away very suddenly a year after my mom did. And when you have all that loss, you don't really have time to recover. You don't really, you have to throw yourself back into caring for the other people.
I also was the primary caregiver for both of my parents and my mother-in-law who had Alzheimer's. And at one point, my father passed away at a certain point, but I had my mother and my mother-in-law living with us,
Uh-huh.
and we were taking care of both of them.
Yes.
And that was and I was working, and it was quite a juggle. I have a question for you. A lot of women that travel with us, we find, are in that sandwich generation
Uh-huh.
where they, cared for their children, but now they're caring for their elderly parents. And a recurring theme that I hear is that people, they are feeling guilty, and I've suffered through this myself, at the sense of relief we feel after they pass away. That the relief comes before any sadness.
Uh-huh.
It's just like, do you find when you speak to so many people, do you find that to be common?
Absolutely. And what I tell them is it's a human reaction. You are human. You are not superheroes. And the reason it's relief is not because, for some people, they, again, don't have a good relationship with the person, whatever. But the main reason it's a relief is because it's exhausting. It's
Yes.
on multiple levels:
Yeah.
mental, physical, emotional,
Yeah.
financial. It's stressful in so many ways, and your body can only take so much, and,
Yeah.
and yet we push ourselves, and like my parents, like as
Right.
caregivers, we do the same thing. We keep going and we keep doing whatever it is we have to do, which is great. But your body then is going to be like, oh, I don't have to. I'm not doing that anymore. I don't need that kind of pressure. So I think that's just a very human reaction. It's not
Yeah.
necessarily a heart reaction. So I try to
Right.
help people
Yeah.
separate that.
Right.
Your body, even your brain, can be relieved, and your heart can still be grieving. They are not mutually exclusive.
Honestly, when my mom passed away, she was the last of the 3 to pass away, and I literally, for, like, 6 months, wasn't sure how to fill my time because I had been so wrapped around taking care of other people, and then I started to feel a little joyous because I could do anything I wanted to do, and I no
Mhm.
longer had to say, "Oh, I can't because of such and such." Then I felt guilty about that.
Uh-huh.
What advice do you give to people who are suffering from I can't go get a manicure, I can't go have lunch with a friend? What do you
Mhm.
tell people?
So, a word about guilt first. What I came to realize, and through all of my caregiving experience, and I'm still a caregiver for other family members, like on a less intensive level, is that, is it really guilt? Because I used to feel like guilt's my constant companion. When I'm working, I feel like I should be with my parents. When I'm with my parents, oh, I got to work, I got to do. Oh, there's always something, or I'm neglecting my relationship with my boyfriend, or. And I finally realized that the guilt wasn't helping me. And this goes also to the aspect of feeling like a failure, like I'm not a good enough caregiver. I didn't prevent that last urinary tract infection. All of those things. And I realized that, okay, what's helpful here? Is this helping me get through the day, this guilt or this feeling of failure? Is it helping my loved ones that I'm caring for? No, it's not helping anybody. So how can I change my perception of that? And so I believe that, first of all, in terms of being a successful caregiver, is just doing your best. Because again, we are human. I may not do it perfectly. I may not make all the great decisions. I'll make another decision, but I will be there and do my best. And the second thing about the guilt is that, is it really guilt? My sister who passed away was a counselor, and she used to say to me, Amy, guilt has a good purpose. It lets us know when we're doing things that aren't in line with our values or our beliefs or what we, think we should doing. Guilt, there's a purpose for guilt, but it's not useful when you overuse it in situations that you don't have anything to feel guilty about. So think about it. Is it really guilt? We pull up guilt when we sign it to that feeling. But the
Yeah.
feeling, I think, is more that it's love. We want to be there for them and we want to take care of ourselves. We want to love ourselves. And in your head that taking care of yourself is simply a practical thing.
Yeah.
So in terms of self-care, what I did for myself came from a very kind of natural experience I had. And so I was driving to the gas station on fumes, almost empty because, of course, busy caregiver. I forgot to get gas. And as I pulled out of the gas station, I noticed, gee, the car runs better on a full tank of gas. And it was just my aha moment. And I thought,
That
oh,
epiphany.
I
Yeah.
can run better with the more gas I have in my tank, the better
Right.
I run. It's not selfish, it's practical, and it's not optional. You can't run your car without gas in it. So I kind of started thinking of it, okay, mostly you don't have the time to fill your tank completely at once. But you can do a lot of small things that keep putting gas in your tank, right? So you can get a good cup of coffee, text a friend, go on a Facebook group, take a walk around the block. I used to do jumping jacks while I waited for my mom in the bathroom, you know, but I think the key thing about it is being consciously aware that that's what you're doing, because you do these things, but you don't naturally, but you don't, if you're conscious of it, you start thinking about, I'm doing this for myself, and that feels good. And then you can do what I call premium fill ups. That would be like listening to this podcast or I did Pilates once a week. That was my thing that I didn't cancel unless it was really an emergency. And then you have to have tune ups, which is the hardest thing. And that's the time away from caregiving.
Right.
And I tried, I was lucky. My best friend and my boyfriend really worked to make sure that once a year I had a week vacation somewhere. And my friend
Oh,
had a timeshare, so she'd take me to her timeshare. I didn't have a lot of money. It was like, how could we do this? And that restored me. But it may be you have an afternoon, or it may be that you have a week, or 6 hours once a month from, the VA providing respite care or some other program.
right.
And then you also do the routine maintenance. So you have to sleep, you have to get good exercise, you have to eat well, all of those basics. For me, and I think everybody knows what their own routine maintenance is. I got acupuncture on a regular basis, and that helped me a lot. Or a massage now and then might be a premium fill up.
Right.
So you think about it, it's a mixture of these. And one time I was sharing this with a bunch of caregivers, and one came up to me afterwards and she said, I figured out what my problem was. And she said, I've only been doing the quick fill ups. I haven't been doing the tune ups, the premium fill ups or the
Right.
routine maintenance. So
Right.
she said, I'm going to change my self care a little bit. The small things work, but only if it's in tandem with a break now and then and all of the other things.
Hold that thought. We'll be right back after this message.
You might think it's just a getaway. A few days off, a change of pace, a little space to breathe. But the real part? That sneaks up on you. A laugh shared over dinner feels like medicine. A simple moment with a stranger starts to feel like something familiar. And then it hits you. You're not just visiting a place, you're being seen, heard, known. And before you even notice, you're not just taking time for yourself, you're rediscovering parts of you that got quiet. Between clinking glasses and sunrise stories, something shifts. These women who started out as strangers, they feel a lot like sisters now. We didn't just plan a trip. We made space for something real. We said it would be special. We just forgot to mention it's the kind of special that stays with you. So if you're ready for more than just time away, if you're ready to connect, come find your place with us. Start your journey at sisterhoodtravels.com.
Let's dive right back in. I know that you've written Juggling Life, Work, and Caregiving. It really has so many tools in there and great perspectives for people who are caregiving. What prompted you to write the book?
My work with AARP has continued over the years as a consultant. And we're talking about the fact that we needed something for caregivers that was sort of a guide, but also included real life stories, because I think sharing our stories is how we learn a lot from each other. So, I decided to write that. It was a labor of love, and I literally wrote a lot of it about 3 o'clock in the morning because after getting my parents in bed. But they were very supportive, and my parents were very excited about it, um, and it. I wanted it to be practical because I don't think caregivers have time to read a lot of narrative. We just don't. And I also wanted to put it together in such a way that if you have a specific issue you're dealing with right now, how do you go right to that in the book?
I was thinking about something you said earlier where, at the beginning of this, when you made the decision to go see your mom or go try to take care of things to get her into the rehab, and how you worked somewhere where they had the leave donation policy where you were able to get through that. So many people aren't in that position.
Yes.
And, that's exacerbates the anxiety and the stress because they're like, I don't know what to do.
Okay.
So I know as a case manager, I know there are a lot of resources out there. Very difficult to access if you actually don't know what you need, and also very difficult to access if you aren't really a good advocate for yourself. But AARP has an amazing amount of resources for caregivers. Can you talk about that?
Yes. In addition to my book, we have an entire section of our website at aarp.org/caregiving where there are articles and information. I write a column. We have a psychologist who writes a column. We have lawyers. We have some really, really, vital information. And just about any topic that you need information about, we've got from the basics of caregiving to if your loved one's living in a facility, if you are dealing with the legal or the financial aspects of caregiving or managing self-care and trying to balance your life. And we have a lot of resources for working caregivers. And so I really encourage you to visit aarp.org/caregiving. And we also have some publications that you can download there or order. I just recently wrote a new caregiving guide that is a smaller version of my book, I guess, in some ways. You can download that. We have a version of it for veteran and military family caregivers. And then we also have a financial workbook for family caregivers. And I've just recently written a Care for the Caregiver guide that will be
Oh,
available this month, very soon. And you'll be able to download that on the website and get some of these practical tips. And AARP has a wonderful AARP Family Caregivers discussion group on Facebook.
on Facebook. Yes, I
Yes.
saw that.
And so please join us. We have over 20,000 people now, and I moderate the group. And we have a couple of other admins, and we try to really keep up. But the biggest aspect of it is caregivers supporting each other. And there's a lot of problem solving that goes on there. How do I deal with this incontinence issue, or how do I deal with this dementia behavior, or I need to get legal documents done. How do I do that? All of those practical things, but also a lot of just emotional support. People can vent on there. It's funny, recently someone said, why are you taking care of your loved ones at home? Why don't you just put them in a facility? And first of all, I don't like that terminology, put
Right.
they're people, not objects. And people responded, and you know what a lot of them said was, just because we complain about the challenges here doesn't mean we don't want to be doing it. We have to vent, we have to get out these frustrations.
With people who understand.
From people who get it. Exactly.
I want to bring something else into this conversation because one of the things that I found commonplace, families don't talk to each other. One of the things that I used to stress with my families, I know that you're okay today, but Mr. So and so, if something happens to you and you can't speak for yourself and your bills have to be paid, does anyone have access to do that? Like, I would try to get them to think about pre-planning. So in AARP's caregiving resources, do you address things like that?
Absolutely. And we have, articles that explain how to do that and where to find what you need a lawyer for, what you don't need a lawyer for. We also have a page, ARP.org slash, I think it's just ARP.org slash advanced directives. We have every state's advanced directives. And for many states, you download the form, you fill it out, and these are for the healthcare powers of attorney and a living will, not the finances, but for the healthcare aspects, which is everyone, every adult should have that, not just older people.
Most people don't realize that, first of all, a durable power of attorney for financial matters is very different than a healthcare power of attorney. And I agree with you. I mean, that's the first question I would ask my patients, when I would go to meet them. It is not shocking to me how many people really don't understand these terms and, things like that. So, again, another thing that's almost the onus of the caregiver to encourage their parents or their family member to address these type of issues. And I find a lot of people think it's bad karma to talk about it.
And one of the things I suggest is, okay, if you're trying to get your parents to do this, you do it and do it at the same time. Do it together. Here's my form. Here's your form. We're both going to fill these out. Or, bring up the fact that, oh, my husband and I just did our advanced directives. Let's do yours too. Again, often in some states, you don't even, I don't think, need a notary, but you may need it notarized, but that's it. You don't have to pay someone to put your advanced directives together.
And at most hospitals, I'll tell you, and certainly this was true. I worked at UNC Chapel Hill hospitals, big public hospital, and so they have a whole team of client or patient relations, people who are notaries. And as long as the patient is cognitively, able to execute these types of documents, they will come right to the bedside.
And make sure you get a copy of that, because you'll need that going forward. It's not just good in that hospital. For the financial aspects of finance and property, sometimes it's called a property power of attorney, financial power of attorney. That is, I do suggest that you consult with an attorney on that if you can, because it's a little bit more complicated for different people sometimes.
Yes.
And sometimes people who do their estate planning, the attorney who sets up their will or their living trust will also set up all the powers of attorney. That's what my parents did. And I was so grateful, because once I really got deeply in caregiving, they had a big thick notebook that had all of their trust information, all of their power of attorney, their living will, and I could just go there, pull it out, copy it, whatever. And so that's, a critical piece to do. And you can find places that will do it for a flat fee. An elder law
Okay.
attorney can be really helpful. There's
Mhm.
the National Association of Elder Law Attorneys.org,
Right.
that where they have a search tool to help find someone who
Yes.
really understands, because it also may involve planning for Medicaid and looking at the finances in that way. And an elder law attorney knows what things to talk to you about. And some of them will also do your estate planning documents. If not, you can go to the National Academy of Estate Planning Attorneys or the National Association of Estate Planners and Councils, I think it is, and find someone who's well versed in those things.
One more question I want to ask you about respite care, because that's always it really ties into what we were talking about earlier about, taking care of the caregiver. Are there resources out there for people who actually cannot afford to hire a respite care worker, don't have anybody in their life that can be even provide like maybe 4 hours of respite care? I know like hospice provided that if you wanted it for in certain situations, but in general, is that a service that's out there?
So that varies from locality to locality. And that's one of the tricky things with working at the national level because the states are all different. And there is, however, federal funding for the National Lifespan Respite Program and things like that that trickle down to the states. And then sometimes there are state funds for respite programs. So one of the things I encourage you to do, ARP has state caregiver resource guides for every state where we list the key organizations and programs that you need to know about. And so you can, that's at arp.org/caregiver resources. And if you download that and look at, then you can find, okay, what's the number for my state Department of Aging, or how do I find my area agency on aging? Because that's my first go to is to send you to your area agency on aging and ask them what respite programs are available for me. They'll ask your specific situation and that type of thing. And then there are a few other resources. If you're a veteran, the VA may provide some resource if your loved one's enrolled in VA healthcare. And so that's the first step. Find out if they are already or can be enrolled in VA healthcare. We got about 6 hours every third week or something, but that was 6 hours of extra help that I had. And you piece it together like a puzzle, really.
Yeah, I know.
And then there's another resource called the Arch Respite Locator, ARCH Respite Locator. They have a respite finder where you can put in your zip code and find out what respite programs are there. Some states have special programs. For example, Arizona has a voucher program where you get these vouchers and you can choose who provides the respite care. So, if maybe you've got a neighbor who's really good about coming to stay with your loved one, but you hate to keep asking them. But if you pay them a little something, it's better. And then, the other thing is the Elder Care Locator is a great resource at eldercare.acl.gov. And
Okay,
that is where you can, again, do a search, find your area agency on aging, your state Department of Aging, etc. So those are
right.
all good resources. You think of respite care as being something you don't have to pay for, but in fact, respite is anybody who gets you a break. So it might be that you piece together some paid caregivers with some free respite programs with family members or friends, and you kind of piece it together that way. If you've got one friend who once a month will come and spend the evening with your loved one and watch a movie with them. Great. That's one evening that you've got to yourself.
Right. And at a certain point, every hour is meaningful, you know? It's a rib it's very similar to, when we're young and we're having children and, the baby's cried all day and you've been with the baby around the clock for 5 weeks and you're like, "If I could just take a bath,"
Yes.
or
Yeah.
a shower,
Mhm.
it's very similar to that.
And in fact, once we started getting respite from the VA for my dad, I he was at a point where I couldn't have, and some of the respite programs, they contract with local home health agencies and they will send a different person each time. Well, when someone's got advanced Alzheimer's, you can't just, they can't orient to the person quickly enough. But I could say, make sure dad drinks this water, watch this TV or listen to this music with him. Can you sweep the floor and vacuum for me? Can you make a meal, whatever they're allowed to do? Can you do dad's exercises with him? Simple things. While I'm doing laundry, I'm, cleaning, maybe taking a bath, whatever, so that I'm there if needed and I can keep checking in. But it's just it's a lifting of some of the responsibility. And that's what helps us fill our tanks.
What's the number one takeaway that you would like our listeners to know?
Well, first of all, I want them to remember that there are programs and government programs that help caregivers, and that we need to advocate for ourselves. AARP, it's a very high priority for AARP to advocate for family caregivers, working on a tax credit for family caregivers. We're working on supporting Social Security and Medicaid and Medicare, which are all things that our loved ones rely on. No, speak up for yourself, tell your story. I think, many of us feel like we're the only ones doing this, and it opens up our world when we connect with another caregiver. So share your stories, advocate for yourself, but also connect with other caregivers, because I think that is, people in this Facebook group that I moderate, the ARP Family Caregivers Discussion Group, they often say, "This group is my lifeline. This is all I've got. I don't have a family member who's helping. I don't have this and that, but I feel like I've got a family here. I feel like I've always got support here." And that I think makes your journey different. So find a local in-person support group, contact your area agency on aging, ask what's in the area, and try virtual. There are virtual support groups, and the Facebook group. So you're never without support, whether it's through
Right.
online, virtual, support group in person, calling your best friend, somebody who understands what's going on. And I think that's what gets us through it. We learn the most from each other, and we get the best support from each other.
I want to tell you, I think you're very remarkable.
Oh,
Uh,
thank you.
as I listen to your story, so first of all, I want to thank you on behalf of all of us who are caregivers, which probably a huge portion of our population.
Yes.
But I want to thank you for your commitment, your dedication, your passion, your advocacy, and all that you're doing with ARP, but also on your own. But many people would, maybe I'm exaggerating, but I think there are people who might have gone through something similar and not have the positive attitude and the way you look at the world, your perception of the world. What do you think makes you not bitter?
Oh, that's such a good question. I think, my dad was the one who was very glass half full. I have a wonderful video of him telling me, just do your best, and I show that a lot of my speeches because it helps. And I think that kind of encouragement made me a person who believes I can do whatever I set my mind to doing. So for me, it was a labor of love, and I do think that makes a difference.
Yes.
I think that helps with the bitterness aspect of it.
Yes.
Uh, I don't have any regrets. I think that's a big piece of it,
That's huge. Yeah.
Yeah, I did the best I could, and I know that. I feel really grateful because I love my work, and so I
Yes.
could do this forever. And I think, that's one of the reasons that I think I've come through without bitterness is I have always tried to focus on gratefulness.
Well, that speaks volumes about who you are. So thank you so much, Amy, for sharing all of this with us. I'm going to stay in touch with you because I think you are just, like I said, remarkable, but I also think you're such a wealth of knowledge.
Thank you so much for having
Thank
me.
you. And thanks for being so gracious and giving me your time. If you like this show, please be sure to like us, follow us, subscribe to us, give us a review, because it really helps grow our podcast.